we have continued to smash the charts in New South Wales, as we always do. And I'm not sure if the slides are showing up yet, but I'm just going to assume they are. Play from the beginning. We had an amazing turnout, as you would have seen from all the articles and tweets and posts, I hope. There were 253 events across New South Wales, and they were the ones that were logged in the National Science Week website, and we know that there are many, many more besides that never get logged. But in terms of our grants funding, we gave away $105,000 to 22 project presenters, and between you created 167 new pieces of online content, and I've got goosebumps thinking about it. It was such an amazing effort, and during the campaign period, we clocked up 70,000 audience views, which is phenomenal. And of course, most of that content is still online and continuing to delight and entertain people. So it's just been amazing. We also scooped up quite a few national grants. They're rare as hen's teeth, hard to come by. And for all you people that put in last week for next year, I wish you all the best. It's a lot of work, and it's a huge effort to actually put in for those grants. So thank you and good luck. In the national context, just look at all the pins on the map. Like New South Wales, again, really kind of smashed the charts. And our small grants program, I'm really just so grateful to say, has generated all these ongoing programs that are going to continue. So as is the case each year, when we give small grants to organisations, many of you create incredible programs that continue. So there were educational programs like UNSW's Praxical project, the Our Ludo's Battery Low on Twitch that we're going to hear about a little bit later. There were 3 brand new podcast series, Deep Blue on My Doorstep, the JAMS Microbiology Pod, and the Idea Evolution Innovation at Sea podcast. And between them, each of these presenters interviewed between 5 to 11 researchers. So just think about all that engagement. And those podcasts are up there forever, and second series are underway. There was a new webinar series from Women in Nuclear, which achieved a huge amount of interest. And there was even a play about seedlings created by our friends in the Illawarra, the Eden Gorge Theatre Company. And that was commissioned by Sydney Science Trail, which you'll hear about a little later. Unis did an amazing job too. Thank you, Unis. There were many well-attended talks and hands-on workshops, virtual, and I know the engagement for that was huge. UNSW let me know that they had 5,000 registrations to their Science Week events. And of course, there was Dr. Carl's house party, which had about 1,000 people turn up on the night. So it was just an amazing effort. Other innovative new platforms include the Innovation Games. This was 5 entertaining videos where sporting stars demonstrated science tricks that you could try at home, and there was commentary by Lee Constable. Fantastic. We also had lots of on-site projects. So we had the Deep Green Biotech Hub partnered with Young Henry's, where you actually got to visit the brewery, do a tour, and then participate in a panel. There was a climate action panel on Simpatico TV and all kinds of stuff. So I put the link to the highlights and I'd love you to look at them. I'd also like to briefly mention the Indigenous Science Education program that, because of the online format, was able to engage people right around Australia in very remote corners of the world and develop a lot of new content in partnership with elders. And they also partnered up with the Wagga Wagga crew down at the library there to do the Riverina Science Hub. So again, we had fabulous festivals in the regions. Here's some coverage of Bega and Riverina, and we'll hear from Orange Cowra Cabonne region shortly. So, and dark science. I must not forget dark science up there in the northern rivers. So wonderful effort, and thank you to everyone. It's no surprise our media coverage was outstanding, and our social media was too. So thanks to everyone who tagged me. You did a great job. And we, of course, helped boost the national presence, as we always do. So I'd like to cross now, if we can, to the first of our guest speakers. We're going to hear from the creators of the Sydney Science Trail, who worked collaboratively with the Royal Botanic Gardens and the Australian Museum. So Yvette and Tori, are you standing by, and can you please share your screen? Yes, there they are. Thank you.
Hello, can you hear us and see our screen?
We hear you, great.
Fantastic. So I'm Tori, I'm a creative producer from the Australian Museum, and I'm here with Yvette from the Royal Botanic Gardens, Sydney. And we worked very closely together for Sydney Science Trail, which is a completely online program that we pivoted quickly to in March to deliver for National Science Week. We ran both a school program and a community program in partnership with the New South Wales Department of Education Dart Connections platform, and of course with Inspiring Australia. It was great to be able to deliver online and reach lots of different audiences, and also work to create our new website, sydneysciencetrail.net.au, and kind of delve into the digital world and work with some incredible digital people such as Circulate, which is our main web development company. Our program was split into 5 categories: plants, technology, space, humans, and earth. Got there. And of course we had a quiz for each category to get a bit of learning in there, and something for everyone to tick off and get their digital badge. But it was great to see lots of different content producers really want to get involved and work in lots of different formats. So we had videos, live streams, games, interactive websites, image galleries, blogs, just to name a few, which allowed us to work with lots of different people.
So we're going to now talk about what we learnt. It was certainly an interesting period from on the 16th of March. Just like all of you, we were shut down, sent home, and pivoted really quickly. The first thing we learnt is that you needed to be agile and adaptable. That was in our teams. We had to upskill our teams in digital content that they'd never tried before. We also needed to be really agile in the platforms that we used to be able to coordinate and work together as 2 large institutions. But we also needed to trust our partners. When we first went to Inspiring Australia, and Christian approached Jackie and said, we're thinking of doing this digitally, and we thought, is this crazy? And Jackie said, no, let's do it. So it's all about trusting that you can do it and that you've got the right team behind you to be able to do it. The next thing that we also learned is that you really need to define your audience really early. If you're too wide, you just don't get that emotive reaction that we really want as science communicators to be able to connect people with the content that we're talking about. We also learnt, and the biggest thing was test, test, test. We're on Zoom today. Jackie and I tried to test to do this half live in the Calyx half, but with Sydney Science Trail, even though we tested and tested and tested, we were live, and 2 days later there was somebody with a mobile phone platform that it did not support. So it doesn't matter how much you try, you've always got to keep those things in mind.
That being said, there were lots of benefits to being digital, and on this slide were just a few examples of what we were able to, the depths that we were able to achieve because we were doing digital. Be able to run things simultaneously, have things up for long periods of time, meant that we could actually expand our reach, which was really important to us to be able to reach our regional and remote schools in New South Wales, the rest of Australia, and even the rest of the world, which was fantastic to see. So being able to reach that wider audience, but also being able to pivot a bit more quickly online. You actually can edit, which is quite different from doing something live, but being able to really refine something and hone it in and edit and upload as soon as it's done is quite a different experience, but definitely a benefit.
The next thing, after a little bit of navel gazing, the pitfalls, the things that we learned from after finishing the project and along on the way. The first thing is you can't read your audience. You can't watch that emotive reaction. You can't just change it up in that live event where you think, oh, I'm not hitting that on the mark, I'm going to try this. The only way of doing that is by evaluating along on the way, but evaluating is really difficult when you're not face-to-face as well. So there was often long periods of time between people finishing the Sydney Science Trail and the evaluation. And so therefore you've got to look at that in a different lens too. They've had time to walk away, reflect, not think about it again, and then we're asking them to evaluate. The other thing is that if you have programs that are ticketed, you can guarantee your audience, you know what that's going to look like. But we had no guarantee of what audience. But having fabulous content partners, and we had the most amazing content partners, they all reached into their own audiences, they all spread the word, and that absolutely made it a success. The other thing was the pitfall was time. From trying to do it from March to really June when we had to be finished, and July to get it all online, we didn't have time to research what the audience wanted. We had to trust our gut, and we had to listen to our partners and our content providers. And really, we've learned lots of lessons by being able to go back and look at that data and that reaction to different areas of the Sydney Science Trail.
And on the back of that, there are definitely some recommendations that we're giving to ourselves for next year, but also would love to share with everyone here who might be looking at taking on a large digital program. And that's, as we all say, planning early as you can. We're very grateful now to have around 10 months to plan for National Science Week next year, but being able to really step-by-step plan things through rather than try and do things simultaneously is the best way to go, which means we can curate a little bit more. I think we were quite hungry for content. We wanted to make sure we took everything, but now actually taking the time to curate that just like we would curate an event in real life. Actually saying we don't want that static piece, we want it to be a bit more dynamic. And again, it's that editing process that we're allowed to do. And I think what brought us to being very happy in the end with our project was having our digital experts on hand, which was our web developers, but also our in-house digital experts that could tell us what a timeline looks like for digital production as opposed to a live event. Was incredibly helpful. And hopefully we'll be taking all of our own advice for Sydney Science Trail 2021. We're partnering again, which is fantastic, doing National Science Week together next year, hopefully on site and digitally. And of course, we want to thank all of our partners, ANSTO, Radio Sydney, ABC Radio Sydney, Inspiring Australia, of course, of which actually got our project off the ground, and our universities, UTS, Macquarie, New South Wales Government, and National Science Week. Our emails are up there, so please feel free to get in touch. And I just want to give a shout out to Christian, who I believe is on this call. He now works for Greater Sydney Parklands, but was an absolute integral part during his time here at Royal Botanic Gardens for Sydney Science Trail.
And our very last piece is what we're doing today, which we're never good at doing when you're a communicator. Learn to celebrate the successes. So it's really lovely to join everybody today to be able to hear how everybody else fared during Sydney Science Trail in what was an unprecedented year that we never want to do again.
Thanks, guys. What a fantastic effort from Sydney Science Trail. So if you could let your screen, stop sharing your screen now, I'd like to invite Phoebe Cowdery and Dr. Jordan Bailey, who are from the Orange Cowra Cabonne Science Hub, who created a whole suite of events from the Central West called Plant X. So Phoebe, share your screen, please.
Okay, firstly, I'd just like to pay my respects to the Wiradjuri Nation, elders both past and present, and those who may be with us today. For those who don't know us, we're a regional arts and cultural organisation, the Corridor Project, and we run facilitate the Orange Cowra Cabonne Science Hub, which we have for a few years. This year, we went back to people just in light of everything that had occurred with COVID, and we knew we'd have to go online. Dr. Jordan Bailey from the DPI in Orange and myself talked about, what we could do as a program, because it's the International Year of Plant Health. We felt that was a really good fit to start, and that's where Plant X was germinated. And so what we decided to do was engage 2 artists who we'd worked with previously and 8 scientists, and create a series of short videos, and then they would be followed up by webinar chats and Q&As, which seemed to work really well. And even post that, we've had many hits for people looking at those videos. So what I'm going to do now is just walk through very quickly what the 2 artists were doing, and then Jordan's going to take over and as the scientist and talk about how those scientists participated when we went out and filmed them. Jordan did a fantastic edit. In terms of production, we were very limited because of resources, but she did an absolutely incredible job for somebody who had just entered that space. And then we had people who had reached those videos prior to us doing the webinars, and then we followed up with talks with those scientists and people engaging in the Q&A afterwards. So one of the artists both these artists we've worked with previously with our Science Hub. For those who don't know Angus Fisher, he's an extraordinary botanical illustration artist and was looking at scientific illustration. He did a 2-part video piece, which he actually documented himself from an island that he lives in Pittwater. So it was really amazing for him to create that content, and then we passed it over to an editor who engaged Kim Goldsmith to actually, kind of finesse the details at the end. So it was, basically legible and had a linear process to it. But it was a really fantastic audience. But what's really exciting is just all the hits afterwards with people, picking that up and actually learning about stippling and science illustration. So Angus, who teaches at the National Art School, who's taught at the Australian Museum, I think he's engaged with other science hubs previously. So Angus has been with us for many years doing projects, and he's just a fantastic collaborator. So we're very lucky, and he was very generous with his time. So there's part 2 with Angus documenting from his home on the island. I'm just going to flick past the scientists that were engaged. Jordan's going to talk about those and just get to Todd Fuller. Todd is also alumni from the National Art School, and he has done instruction in digital animation for our Science Hub previously, but he really concentrated on bees for this one. So the target market probably was more geared towards teenagers and children, but there were many adults who also came into the online session with Todd. So that's where I'm going to leave it. But just very quickly, just in terms of the impact on our audiences, I would say we're probably, it's still going up. We're up to about 600 views since National Science Week. In terms of engagement online, that wasn't as strong as we'd hoped, but that also wasn't a hindrance because, then they spread the word to other, communities and audiences that then looked at the work online. And so we probably had about 120 all up at the different webinars. So I might hand it over to Dr. Jordan Bailey. Jordan?
Yeah, just scroll back up to the banner.
You tell me when to scroll.
Up to the banner image, up to the top.
Yep.
Yeah, so basically like everybody else, we had all these things planned and then they were all cancelled. I was going to be a part of Sydney Science Trail live, and then luckily was still able to be a part of the website. But Phoebe had approached me about, what can we do together as we've worked together before? And she liked this idea of, interviewing scientists. And I was like, well, international plant health, let's promote all of our great plant health scientists that are working to protect all of Australia's plants. And I think one downfall of the online thing is I didn't stop. So I just kept adding people. Oh, do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? Do you want to do it? And then realized, oh gosh, I got to film them all and make all the videos and edit it all now. So we ended up going from Shannon there in the yellow jumper up in, Arimba, down through into Menangle with Tony in the white there. They're our plant pathologists, bacteria and virology. And then we saw Angus out at Bathurst in the high vis talking about plant fungal pathogens and his work with eucalyptus, so moving to, environmental problems. Meg in the jumper there, she was working with protecting species, so our threatened species and things like that. And we met her, and I'm working with her on a mushroom project. And then we had Liz, obviously, in the bee suit. Was our bee technical officer. So we had this really great, and now entomologist, of course, and myself on the end, and the other end is the insect curator. So we did a little video on the collections too. I manage a collection of plant diseases for anyone that's interested. And so I thought it was really great to have that variety. There was sort of something for everyone. But the topics were actually a bit higher science, I suppose, and people who were coming online were actually other industry and other scientists from around the country who had an idea of the work we did already and wanted to know more, or wanted to chat with Shannon or chat with Tony. Or we had one woman have a lot of great questions for Cronus about, fruit flies and all this stuff, like really specific things. So it was also a nice sort of networking tool for these scientists as well, like a mini conference style. Things that we learned, one is that marketing is really hard. And like for Phoebe to partner with DPI meant we had access to the DPI comms team who could help out a little bit in the social media channels and sharing some things and getting the word out there. And then I'm sure that this whole thing cost more in money and time than, say, a live event with 3 speakers and a few PowerPoints on a pull down would have cost in the end. And partly is because I ended up editing all the videos, although it was super nice, winter sun outside, working from home, editing videos, so I'm not complaining at all. But the upshot is now we've got a permanent resource. So, these videos are really great and I want to see them used more into the future. The little webpage we did for Sydney Science Trail, I'm trying to turn into a full-fledged website for, school education and these sorts of videos where it's, hey, meet our scientists and see what they do and see what biosecurity does will be really useful for us into the future. So yeah, I think that's everything.
Thank you, Phoebe. And Jordan, what a
done, Jackie, we all right?
Yes, thank you so much. Can you hear me? If you could just let the screen come back again, congratulations. And you can see that work by clicking on the link at the top of the chat. Fantastic also that we have all this legacy content that you're going to roll out again, and it shows the exciting, interesting and beautiful jobs that people have in regional New South Wales, which is just a bonus. Anyway, let's go now to Alice Motion, a colleague who's just won the Eureka Prize. Yay, Alice! Give her a round of applause. Alice is going to tell us about her project Live from the Lab. Thanks, Alice.
Thanks so much, Jackie. So lovely to be here. I'm joining everybody from the land of the Gadigal people here at the University of Sydney, just over the road from Kristl and Jackie, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners too. Live from the Lab was a really fun project to be involved in this year, and I can't actually possibly list all of the people who are involved in this and acknowledge them in the 5 minutes I have and do what Jackie asked me to do. So I'd like to start by saying that this was a collaboration between FBI Radio, the University of Sydney, Kristl's team and Holly Kershaw in partner engagement and outreach, and also the University of Sydney's Nano Institute. And it wouldn't have been possible without all of these people and the support of IA and all of this funding. So I want to thank everybody, and I'm sorry that I can't tell you how fabulous everyone in this project has been, but I'll be happy to tell you more about it if I see you or talk to you again. So this project emerged as a project that came from our desire in a research project to start sharing stories of nanoscience through sound and through music. And its origins are actually much earlier than this year. I've been hosting a science segment on FBI Radio for about almost 5.5 years now, every Tuesday morning, called Up an Atom. And back in the early days in 2015, we invited an artist, Obscura Hale, to come onto the radio. And he's just so prolific. He wrote a couple of songs in response to a piece of science that I was going to talk about. And he, performed a piece of music that was just beautiful. I'll share some links afterwards that was linked to the ideas of the science that was going to be communicated. And this year, when everything moved online, it just felt like a really good opportunity to try and do something with this project that had long been an ambition of our team to try and realize in a live concert experience of having performers compose new music that was in response to science. But when things switched online, we thought, why don't we do something a little bit different with that format and almost pilot it and take this as an advantage for this year? So the way that this project worked is that each morning of National Science Week, and actually we were super keen, so we started the Friday before, we had a different local musician partnered with a different researcher from each of Sydney Nano's Grand Challenge projects. And we were able to commission them, following a bit of a speed dating event for only an hour and a half, to compose a new piece of music in response to the science. We put a bit of a frame, a bit of restrictions on this. We only let them talk to each other for 90 minutes deliberately, because they only had a couple of weeks to come up with a piece of music and to create a little bit of excitement around that. And then what we did is we had a grand reveal. So each day of National Science Week, but starting on the Friday, we'd invite the scientist and the musician to come and talk about the experience and the research. And then we'd have a big reveal where we'd play the song for the first time and we'd hear the researchers' response to it. They hadn't heard it before. And actually that turned out to be probably the most special thing about this project, was to hear their reaction to a piece of art that had been composed about them and their research and the things that they find so interesting. I can't play you a song, but I'll share some links with you. So this is Sean again, from who I mentioned before, from Obscura Hale. He was able to be part of this project, which was really great to not close this loop, but to continue this partnership with him. Fantastic musician. And he joined us with Tamara Issa, who's also in Obscura Hale. And here's one of our young researchers, Wenjia Yang, who was a scientist involved as a PhD student in this project. So I'll click on. So I'm going to move quickly now to the benefits of online. I will be saying some similar things to our previous speakers, which is kind of reassuring that we experience some of the same things here. But in terms of benefit, I'd like to focus on three things. So I'm going to focus on compass, creativity, and collaboration. So in terms of the compass, many of you have said this too, we managed to reach different audiences and much larger audiences than we would have done with an in-person event. We got to broadcast every morning. We reached people where they are. They didn't have to come anywhere. They switched on their radio, even if they weren't expecting some science. They got it every morning, and we were able to reach people beyond the event. These legacy items that Jackie is referring to. We've got some podcasts and ongoing activities. The creativity, I think, when you have to do something quickly and you have to do something differently, it's really quite exhilarating to start thinking about how you can do something different, to shake away the ideas you had traditionally about an event. And I think the number one here, the biggest benefit is just reminding us of how important collaboration is and how the people we work with really make all the difference. And having people who will help you out when something goes a little bit awry or falls to pieces last minute, to have colleagues and collaborators who make these things happen, because none of these Science Week events work with a single person. They all require teams and collaboration. So then to the pitfalls, I'm going to focus on three things here too. I'm going to focus on community, connection, and capacity. So I think one of the saddest things, and this is why thanks Jackie for organising this event, we missed our community. It's a chance in National Science Week to see some of our friends or our colleagues that we don't get to see, to have a wine or a coffee or some crisps in between our events when we haven't got time to eat any food for the whole of Science Week. So you end up eating crisps and surviving on salted crisps and white wine sometimes. And I really missed everybody. I really miss seeing people and getting that kind of boost from the people that we love, that we like to work with. The other one is connection. So this echoes what other speakers have said. You can't see what's happening in the faces of the people you're talking to. You can't, as has already been mentioned, you can't adapt or change what you're doing or change the pace or go back over something. So you sort of feel a little bit like you're talking into an empty space. And the other one was capacity. So I felt in some ways like this was a great opportunity to increase accessibility and to increase the number of events, but in some ways it was a bit overwhelming how many events there were and what to go to, and this FOMO almost of what to select. And so without at all wanting to stop anyone from having events, please, that's not what I'm saying at all. It just felt a little bit like I don't quite know where to go to or which to pick or what's on each night. And I think these are kind of the major things that felt like pitfalls for us. One of the things that I would say is that I think we had a strong advantage in this, in that we used a piece of traditional media to enable this project. So we weren't just online. We used the radio, something that's been around for a very long time. We didn't just have to rely on doing online performances. And actually the turnout to our online events, the listening projects after was quite small, something we'd have to work on in a future year. Should we not be back to in person, and we hope to be with a future iteration of Live from the Lab. So that's kind of my summary. If you want to find out more about Live from the Lab, why not? I thought I'd give it a little plug. You can find some of the podcast episodes on Apple Podcasts or online. And lots of these things were done. You can look at our legacy website. A lot of these things were done. We wouldn't have been able to do it without funding, but we were also able to do this on quite a small budget. To be honest, with the scope of what we achieved, I was really proud of that. So when we think about what we might be able to do if we were successful with some more funding or a different model, I'm really, looking forward to seeing where this project goes. So just like to thanks everyone who was involved in this project, and sorry that I couldn't shout out all of the presenters and all of the artists, but I would be happy to do that another time.
Thank you so much, Alice. And I absolutely understand what you're saying about missing everybody. I felt the same way and spent probably all day and all night online for that whole period, even more. And quite often I just took a picnic blanket down to Tamarama Beach, so I wasn't at home alone and sat there kind of surrounded by beachgoers. Just it was such a strange thing. But I do think there's lots of potential online to connect like we are now. And let's talk about that further when we open the floor. So thanks, Alice. And now let's hear from Michael, who absolutely had a really surprising experience on Twitch. And I can't wait to hear about this. For people who might not know what Twitch is, it's a platform where people who love gaming go to talk about gaming. So Michael, if you can enlighten us a bit about why Twitch and what's Twitch, and tell us how you went with battery low, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So unlike everyone else, I don't have slides. I am the slide, so just make me big and you'll be able to see everything. I'm really interested in technology. It's part of what I research as well. So I'm always looking for new ways to use technology and new ways of how people use technologies. And technology is really pervasive. It's just, we use it all the time to do everything nowadays. And our kids use it to interact. So I'm really keen on this kind of stuff. And the other thing is I have a small little company called Arludo, and we create educational games. And kind of from that stemmed this idea of battery low. And what battery low really was gathering 16 different scientists in my house in different time periods. And we just played games and chatted about science in a really kind of casual, low-key kind of way. So we did this on something called Twitch. Now, when I said I'm interested in new technologies, Twitch has actually been around for quite a long time. And all the way you can see over here from 2013, when it had only a very, very few viewers. And now these are watch hours per month. We are, push this over, we are at almost 2 billion hours watched a month after the pandemic kind of started. So here's this kind of medium that people are using every day. And they're using it every day to watch people play video games. That's generally what it is. But it's exploded into something really interesting. Like there's a Maori carver in New Zealand who carves, and he chats with his viewers as he's carving. And he's got over 1 million viewers, subscribers, and they join him every day as he's making his art. So it's become this platform where people can talk about video games and watch people play video games, and it's become so much more. But there's no one doing any kind of science stuff on it. And that's something that I wanted to try. So unlike everyone else that's talked today, our event was made for online. So we didn't scramble at the end. We were scrambling from the beginning, trying to actually create an online kind of presence. And the difficult thing is when you move into something that's online and you move into a space that is occupied by people who do this stuff really, really well, what it means is you also kind of have to be ready to do things the way they do as well. So you have to have all those transitions, you have to have the video games ready, you have to have that opportunity kind of draw your viewers in to what you're doing. And that's kind of what we did. We had this opportunity where we could actually play video games with people. And I'll just have this video running in the background. And here's a little video about one of our scientists that we're kind of putting together. Yes, videos are very, very difficult to edit, as we've already heard, and you can spend an obscene amount of time doing this kind of stuff and making things look perfect. But what we did is we just sat there, we played video games, and we chatted. And we found people just tuned in. And then they tuned out, and some others came in. Sometimes they came back. And that's kind of what Twitch really is. It's this venue where people drop into things to experience something different. And we had nearly 17,000 people show up, which I was really, really surprised about. I expected to get about 400. So we were really, really happy about the outcome and how things kind of happened. So to kind of give you an idea, the thing that we learned is there is an appetite for this kinds of things, for doing new things and for trying new things. And people are very forgiving when mistakes are kind of made, especially when you're trying something new. The other thing is that we've learned is you need to go to your audience. If you want to engage with somebody new and different, somebody who isn't normally going to come to one of your shows, then you have to go to them and find a way to go to them. But when you do, you have to be very ready to engage them in a manner that they're very accustomed to, because otherwise they tune out even more quickly. So that's kind of the lessons that we've learned from this. And you know, it takes a lot of effort to learn how these people interact online and to try and make things engaging. But it's also extremely rewarding because it's fun and something very, very different. And I had an absolute blast chatting to 16 different young scientists who don't have very much experience doing any kind of outreach at all. So that was our job, really, to try and to lift these people up and to give them a voice. And we had a really diverse crowd of people, which was really, really cool. So the last thing I'll say is we've had so much fun with this that we're now making it a monthly show starting next year. And it's going to be something a little bit different, where we're actually going to be doing science live with the audience. So this is Sophie Calabreto. She's going to be my co-host, and we're going to be working together on this show. And the idea is we're going to have 4 or 5 scientists come on the show, and we'll be chatting about some different topic, like what is beauty? How do you make the perfect gamer? Things where science doesn't have a perfect answer. And then what we're going to do is we're going to explore that topic with them live. So we're really going to be involving the audience in experiments that we're doing live with everyone, and also using games to collect data like our Ludo normally does. So that's kind of the next step that we're going to be trying to do, is making the audience part of the actual science and giving them an opportunity to be scientists and think like scientists, which I'm really, really excited about. So if you're interested, you can follow us on Twitch, and that's where you can find where we are. So I think that's probably about the time, somewhere around there. So I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, just email me. I'm easy to find, Michael Kasumovic. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Michael. And you put us all to shame with the tech skills. I must say it's really exciting that you're delving into that realm and you've got the patience to go with it and learn. And I think
it's fun. It's tough. Yeah.
I think for all of us, we've learned so much this year. And hold your questions for Michael for about 10 minutes. We'll have a chance, probably 20 minutes actually, because we're going to talk about the evaluation first. But hold those questions. I'm sure there'll be lots. I'd like to throw now to Heather Catchpole, who worked with Inspiring Australia and the National Inspiring Australia teams to come up with some training. So this was something we realised very early on the piece, that if we were going to go ahead with Science Week this year, we all needed the new skills. Michael, can you unshare your screen, please? Oh, sorry, you're not sharing. Sorry, my bad. I can just see you there with your background. So Heather, along with Ben Newsome from Physics Education and Karen Player, put together an amazing training package, and I'll let Heather tell you all about it. Heather.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks for making me follow Michael.
Sorry.
So yeah, it was terrific opportunity to engage with you all very early on at the stage where we were working on getting all of this together. And we worked with Physics Education and Sydney Science Education and Inspiring Australia, all states, to put together a training manual and to put together some kind of training features right early on to help us to facilitate this. And it was a real learning example for us. We were we know everybody was scrambling at that stage. So I'm just going to take you through how we went about preparing those sessions and developing that content, and the sort of strategy that we had and results that we had around that. So basically, we looked at immediate needs first. So this was late March, and a lot of us were really unsure about whether events were going to continue. The Olympics was still on at that stage, but there was a need to quickly get online. So one of the first things that we looked at was technical confidence, community safety, and just basics like registering participants. I think community safety is something that hasn't been mentioned so far, and I don't know how many of you had issues with that, or kind of continue to have issues around that. And I think there's certainly room to do more on those resources. So if you are still struggling for that, do look up Physics Education. They've been online. Sydney Science Education, these guys have been online for 10 or 15 years. So there was a lot of resources and there was a lot of expertise that was already existing in the virtual excursions space. But it was a great opportunity just to really quickly get technology, software tips and hints out there. We then looked at developing some of the best practice that had come from that experience. So looking at accessibility, I really loved what I think was Tori said in the beginning about your audiences, understanding your audiences, and also Michael about, you have to go to your audience. So one of those things that I often talk about with Refraction Media, we're all about trying to understand who those audiences are, and you can spend quite a lot of time defining and understanding that audience. And I think it's so important to do that straight away. We talked about interactivity, and we can see from Michael's presentation, obviously there's more to learn about interactivity. There's new platforms and software and interesting things are coming out all the time in this space. So that was a really key one. But we also wanted to talk about interactivity in the sense of people actually enjoying connecting with us and what we did. So there's some very simple techniques that you can do as well, just to keep your audience engaged. We talked about developing your program, how to kind of put that together and marketing that as well. And then finally, we wanted to get everybody to really think big and to think about how to partner up and do, extremely impressive things. And I've just been blown away listening to you all about the partnerships that have been developed and the scope of people who have been involved, from artists to musicians to gamers. It's just been terrific. So that third section, we wanted to look at partnering up. We wanted to look at session design, best practice in collaboration, and just include some case studies, particularly from some of our international guests who, again, might have been working in this space for a while, about what's really worked well for them. What was really important to us was that the sessions were co-designed and that we were creating with the community that we're involved in. So the first thing that we did was to survey everybody to find out what they wanted to know, what the gaps in knowledge are, what their confidence levels were, and so that we made sure that the sessions that we were designing to suit. So we ended up running, I think it was 7 sessions across April to June. And we tailored, we had those first 3 themes thought out, but we left the last couple to be, determined as community needs. We recorded the chat and the Q&A functions in the webinar. And so we were able to get that information from those questions that were being asked and include that content in either the next session or in the training manual. We immediately followed up with resources. So we put cheat sheets out as soon as we could, but we added to that all the time. So we were creating content on the fly to make sure that what we were putting in was really fitting in those gaps. And also there's such a wealth of knowledge in this community, and it's lovely to connect with you all again. We wanted to make sure that we were capturing all of that knowledge from the people who have been doing this in this space and include that as well. So just a few of the examples of the great content that came out. Fun ways to engage with your audience. I tried out, I can't remember who started doing it, but there was using the chat function for live poetry. That was a lot of fun. So I tried that out in a different session. They were playing bingo, getting everybody to you know, write something down and all hold it up on your Zoom screen, you know, spotlighting different people and different things, and just finding different ways to work with this, you know, sort of 12 by 12 square or whatever you have on your screen, because we can, you know, we can raise our hands, we can move, we can actually, you know, do things. So there was a lot of fun content that came out of that. People, as I said, people had very basic needs as what speaker should I get? Which camera is best? Oh, I like what you're doing. What is that? Where can I buy it? So just the basics on what to get and where to get it. There were a lot of things that were really critical to share about people's different audiences. Some people are connecting with the digitally excluded. So we needed to have some information about, you know, how you best get out into those different regional environments or low bandwidth environments. I'm in Balmain, it's a low bandwidth environment, believe it or not. So just making sure that you think about those, connecting through culture. So we wanted to make sure that we were capturing the knowledge about how people were already connecting with culture, and to think about that, and to think about our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander audiences in what they were presenting and what they were doing, and just to have that that mindset in thinking about connecting there, connecting with elderly people as well. So, you know, not often an audience that you that we might be thinking about in the school space. I've been working a lot with schools in physics and Sydney science education. You know, we're talking with small libraries sometimes who main audience might be elderly people. So there were some great strategies with, you know, about how to even go out to aged care homes and connect with audiences there, and to use your audience and use their great knowledge and wisdom and storytelling to kind of connect with those stories as well. We practiced what we preached. We were a new partnership, physics education, Sydney science education, Inspiring Australia and us at Refraction Media. We hadn't worked together before, so we got to collaborate on the fly, which was great. And I'd just like to shout out to those great partners in putting together those presentations as well. It was really amazing to then, you know, see what was created from those couple of short training sessions that we did. Jackie's just going to tell us a little bit about how that went on the impact. So I'll hand over now to Jackie to do that.
Thank you, Heather. And it was a wonderful collaboration. It was really just the whole community co-designed that training, as Heather said, and just getting the voices of everybody who needed the training gave us heaps of ideas as well. And we do meet now monthly as a virtual lunchtime networking, which you'll get invitations to that. If you haven't come along already, just send me a note and I'll invite you to our next lightning lunch. But in terms of how we went with the training, look at this. We had 1,500 people register. 2/3 of them actually came along to the training, and we've had quite a few downloads as well. And the videos, of course, are up there for people to continue to use as they want to. Across all the surveys, we were trying to evaluate confidence. So this was our benchmark that we used to measure success. And just note the green bar. As the training went on, that green bar became really small, which is just a fantastic outcome. So I got lots of positive feedback from my colleagues in other states, and also from the many, many people who did the training. So again, thanks Heather, Ben and Karen. It was a great collaboration. And thanks to my colleagues in other states and the Office of the New South Wales Chief Science and Engineer for chipping in to commission this piece of work. Okay, so now I'm going to hand back to Kristl and we'll continue with our meeting.
Thanks everyone for those insights, and congratulations to you all for the phenomenal success of all of those projects. It was really inspiring to hear all about those. And I wanted to convey not only my thanks, but thanks on behalf of the New South Wales Exec Committee as well, to not just our presenters today, but everyone who was involved in National Science Week. Well done. As you know, thanks to Jackie, the Wrangler, she manages to bring everyone together during this time. And what we do is really strategic and collaborative, and the results speak for themselves. So thank you to Jackie and to you all. Turning now to evaluation. This year researchers from the University of Sydney have evaluated both audience and event organiser experiences of National Science Week in the unique circumstances of COVID. So in the past, when most Science Week events have been held outdoors or in large public venues without the need for registration, evaluation has always posed a challenge. Without a national evaluation framework, nor a means for mandating participation in a central survey for all campaign participants, very little is known about the audience experience year on year, nor the event presenter experience. So this year, with most events online, we had a golden opportunity to learn about the impact of our Science Week efforts. And to take us through the preliminary findings, I'll now welcome back Dr. Alice Motion, who is leading this research project. And after Alice has spoken, we'll open up for some discussion. So if you could hold your questions until then, that would be great. Over to you, Alice.
Thanks, Kristl. And thanks for the introduction. So, I saw a comment from Jeff a little earlier that said, it's a wonder that we don't have whiplash as things change very quickly. I think our team have been thinking about evaluating and looking at National Science Week for a little while now. And I think if COVID-19 hadn't happened, we probably would have aimed to do this next year. But when we saw, as Kristl said, sorry to repeat a little bit, but this was, a really unique year to capture some information. And the capacity to do this is really thanks to the researchers who've led this survey that I'll introduce you to. Just giving a little bit of context to our research team. We are in the School of Chemistry, and we're all part of the Chemistry Education and Communication Research theme that's headed by Associate Professor Ziggy Schmidt, who's just in the bottom right-hand corner, which is a little bit unusual to have a research theme within a School of Science that's focused on education and communication. So we're really lucky. And my research team is the SCOPE group. And we have some researchers who work in the laboratory doing chemistry, and we have some researchers who are doing science communication research, and some folks who are somewhere on that spectrum or range in between. So the people who've done this work and who've put together this presentation are Olivia and Ellie. So many of you will know both of these folks. So Ellie Downing has come to do a PhD, in our group, and is co-supervised by myself and Chiara O'Reilly, who's from Museum Studies. She's the Director of Museum and Heritage Studies. So it's a really great science and arts collaboration. And Olivia McRae is studying for a PhD in science communication with Rain Pullen as her co-supervisor. And together, Olivia and Ellie have done the vast majority of work. So it's important that I credit these two for being so quick at adapting and creating this survey. And they're both online, so I think they'll help me to answer any questions, so I hope they will. So we'll take you on a little bit of a whistle-stop survey, a whistle-stop tour of the evaluation. And I guess it's important to note that there's really two parts of this research. There's the questionnaire that was shared with audiences and presenters that gives us a snapshot of some information that's important to understand who was there and some of the responses, but also that Olivia and Ellie are following up with interviews with audience members and presenters, and we can't yet present all of that data. They're still analysing and coding some of these responses, so we'll share that with you, in the future. So just as a quick snapshot of where people joined us from, we can see that New South Wales had significant response rates for our audience record and presenter record locations. And we received, the data that I'm going to present today is from 610 responses to the audience survey. This will go up slightly when we report our final findings, as we had some later additions to these surveys. So if you see this number change in the future, there's nothing strange here. It's just that we have a few more responses. And I think one of the things that we were a little bit disappointed at was the number of responses we got, and we want to work on that for future rounds. Perhaps trying to send people out surveys and evaluations in a year when everyone is just a little bit over being online was a challenge, and not being able to ask somebody right in front of you if they'll complete a survey or to ask them about the event. But we can reflect on that a little bit later too. So here's a snapshot of where we had our folks from. Quite interesting to see overseas participants and overseas people who've filled out the evaluation, which is interesting to note. So we've reached beyond the shores of Australia, which is great to see. And then here's a bit of a snapshot of some of who these people were in terms of the demographics. And I think this data, you have to be really careful when collecting demographic data, but it is really important for us to know who is coming to our events too, so that we can see if we are reaching all of the audiences that we want to. So you can see a snapshot here that from the events or event series that we captured, 60% of folks hadn't attended before, and 61% of folks plan to attend more than one event, which is interesting. So we seem to have got a new audience here. And when we look at languages spoken at home, there's a skew towards English only, and a skew towards people who identify as female in the audience who joined us, or at least the audience who responded to our questionnaire, to our survey. And in terms of the presenters, we had 31% of people who hadn't presented before, which is really great to see that there are new folks coming into these spaces. But also a large majority of people, a large percentage of people who also present science events outside of National Science Week. And again, a skew to people who identify as female in the presenters. So in terms of the average hours a week spent engaging with science from our audience and presenters, I guess the key takeaway point here is that 46% of our audience spent under 5 hours engaging with science. So hopefully this means that we have invited some people into our events who aren't working within science and perhaps working in other fields, whereas 67% of presenters spend over 10 hours engaging. So perhaps our presenters are skewed to folks who do work in science areas, which is perhaps not unsurprising. Then when we look at the value of an interest in science, and sorry, I've got this thing, where the tab is just above my slide, so sorry about that. When we look at the audience records for value and interest in science, and we ask people to answer some of these questions on a sliding scale, so they express their answers in this way, 92% gave a rating above 70, reflecting the importance of the community to have access to science events, and almost 30% gave this a rating of 100. 54% rated science as 100% important to society, and 46% rated their interest in science as 100%. So we've got a high interest in science here. And then when we look at presenter records, again, unsurprisingly, perhaps 100% think it's really important, or think it's above 70% in importance for the community to have access to science events, and almost 50% gave this a rating of 100. 3/4 of these presenters worked in STEM, and almost half said they work in research. So we have presenters who are coming from research fields, which is also, I think, pretty interesting, that we're sharing science that's happening within our institutions, which is one of the important places for us to share research from. In terms of enjoyment and experience, which is of course really important, we want people to enjoy these events. Over 90% said that events held their interest and attention. We've got a good response in terms of connection to people in the community, learning about science, showed how science is relevant to my life, and that people thought that our events were presented clearly and in a way that's easy to understand. And in summary, I guess it's saying that we have an almost 30% enjoyment rating of 100%, a really high enjoyment rating, and 30% of respondents strongly agreed with all of these 5 statements. What about our presenters? Are they enjoying this experience? Hopefully, yes, they are. So 95% were satisfied with the presenting experience. 86% engage new audiences. I think that's really interesting. And this is kind of something that's come through from everyone else's presentations, and it's nice to see that this has come through in the data, that we have reached different people, different audiences. This is an advantage of online here. And over 90% want to present at future events. So the experiences this year, although challenging, haven't turned most of the presenters off, which is really good to see. And I guess here are some of the summary of the key points that 46% of presenters strongly agreed or agreed with all of these three statements. So, I think this is something that I'd love to talk about more, perhaps in another forum, or, to talk about in the discussions afterwards. But we all, and this has come up, in the earlier talks, a lot of us we were almost at a risk of being so busy planning our events that sometimes we forget to do a good job of telling people about them or sharing where those events are happening and to get people to come along to these events. And these are the channel usages, and you can see the differences here in where presenters have used different channels and where audiences have found out about what's happening. So the icons here that we have, this one at the top is for websites. This is through Inspiring Australia. Here we have social media. This is local media, and this is word of mouth. And perhaps the most interesting things are also to look at the other channels, such as newsletters, direct contacts, networking, and previous involvement. So using your networks is really important. But one of the things that emerges here is that audience don't seem to have been finding, if we look at this 3%, they don't seem to have been finding out about events from local media, despite investments in time from presenters. So there's a big disparity here, which is interesting, I think. And social media is the place where most audiences found out about events. So it's a good reminder of the importance of our social media presence and footprint. In terms of impressions, 80% of audience members said that they would tell someone about the event, so there's some engagement afterwards. 58% said they'd follow up on something afterwards, and almost everyone would recommend National Science Week to others, so this is a really positive result. 12% of people, back to these connection problems that Heather cited, in Balmain in the middle of the city. This is also a problem for people across Australia. We won't go into that in too much details, but 12% in experience connection issues, which is something we need to think about in terms of accessibility, because we think about online as being more accessible, but it's not if you can't stream whatever's happening on there. In terms of presenter records, 95% were satisfied with the presenting experience. 100% would present at Futures National Science Week event, so it's good news, Jackie. And 17% of presenters experienced connection issues. And this is quite alarming, I think, because these are folks who, as we've heard earlier, will have practiced and set up. But, once you have a huge number of people joining your Zoom call, sometimes your adequate broadband just cannot cope and collapses. So, this is still something we have to think about, and it's not an afterthought, is it? It's something we need to think about really carefully. So this is, I've just presented a kind of snapshot of some of the data we've got from the questionnaire. Our study's focused on some more research questions, and in particular, we really want to know about accessibility. Does online really make events more accessible? And are we bringing in a new audience, or are we switching our audience, or what's happening with that audience? We really want to know more about that. We also want to know something about the significance of these events. Is it something that stayed with them? What happens afterwards? Are they inspired to follow up any actions after attending? What's the engagement like? And how does having Science or Science Week online change the participation in science outreach events? In terms of presenters, we want to know who's running these events and what are the value of these events to them. I don't think there's really anybody or very few people who are doing it for monetary value. It's for something far different to this. But what are those values, and what are the motivations of these presenters? And how has online changed? And we've heard, some perspectives on this today, the delivery or the impact of the presentation of science outreach events. And sorry to, put in a bit of a kind of a cliffhanger, but we want to share more of this with you, but Olivia and Ellie particularly are still in the process of understanding some of the data, both from the survey, but also from their more in-depth follow-up interviews with both audience members and presenters who've been generous enough with their time. So I'm going to stop there because we also need to talk, but if you want to find out more about this project, you can follow our GitHub site where we'll be updating things as we go along. We try our best to be open researchers. We've been open scientists for a long time. We're trying to be open social scientists and working out how to do this with the constraints of ethics and all of those really important things. So if you want to follow up and find out what's happening as soon as we share anything, that's the place to look. And I really look forward to trying to answer any of your questions or talking about this in the discussion that will follow now. So thanks very much, Jackie.
Thanks, Alice. That's fantastic.
Sorry, Kristl.
No, that's okay. Now moving to questions. Does anyone have, while we've got Alice here, anyone have any questions for Alice around the evaluation?
And feel free to jump in, Olivia and Ellie, if you want to. You can come in too, because I think this is the thing that, these two researchers have driven this. So thanks to Olivia and Ellie for all of their hard work.
If I may ask a question, it's Troy Gaston here from University of Newcastle. Thanks a lot for that review of the data. It looks like we did everything fantastically well. What didn't we do so well so we can improve on that for 2021?
So Ellie or Olivia, if you want to come on, please do. Otherwise, I will have a go.
Hello.
Yep.
So I'm Ellie. I think, as Alice pointed out, the advertisement of the events is actually something that we can do better, because people who come to the events have a really good time. They want to engage with the content beyond, and a lot of people talked about, actively reaching out to the presenters to find out more. But I think what happens online that doesn't happen as much digitally is that people have to very consciously engage. So it's a lot harder to stumble upon events, and it's a lot harder to kind of get that snowball effect by following a venue because it's online. So we've got to have much stronger lines of communications out to audiences to let them know how to find events, what's happening, and multiple channels that do that, because one person, you can't rely on them subscribing to one particular channel. You need to put it out as much as possible. And I don't have any advice on how to do that yet, but hopefully by the end of the study, we'll be able to provide more insight into things that could work or behaviours that we're doing right now, which are worth more investment from us.
Thanks, Ellie. We've just had someone ask if Alice or Ellie could share the GitHub URL. So if you, oh great, there we go, excellent, thank you. Other questions? There was a question on the chat about are there any simple resources to help event organisers who aren't social scientists extract meaning from the raw data about their events?
I'm not sure if there are any simple resources, but we will do our best to help folks who'd like to understand that data, and we will, in our blogs that will follow, we can offer support if that's helpful. And we can also have a look. We'll try and have a look to see if there are any simple resources too. So I'm sorry that I don't have a solid answer to that, Caitlin, but we'll see what we can do.
Sorry, go Jackie.
I just wanted to let you know that the Women in STEM Ambassador has created resources for evaluating women in STEM projects, and they're actually applicable to all STEM projects. So check out the Women in STEM Ambassador page, and we can pop a link in the chat about where to find them.
Great. There is another question from Nicole. Are we breaking down social media to individual platforms?
Not in this case, Nicole. That's a really lovely point, and I guess that's the other thing that, we've not talked to Jackie about this just yet, or Inspiring Australia, but if we're going to run something like this again, we'd also really like feedback on, what are the important things for different folks to know, because it's always a real challenge to try and ask the questions that that different people want to know, but also to try and have something that's not too long. Because I think the minute the survey gets too long, you start to see a drop off in people completing it too. So not in this case, Nicole.
And it is a balance, you're right. Okay, we might wrap up the questions there for the evaluation, but now I would like to open up to any questions for any of our earlier presenters. So Yvette and Tori, Phoebe and Jordan, Alice, relating to Live from the Lab, Michael or Heather. Any questions? Other than comments on them all being fantastic and everyone wanting to learn Michael's presentation technique. Very impressive. No, oh, hang on, we're getting some questions. Okay. Are they more related? So we can keep putting your questions in the chat about the evaluation and we will get back to everyone with those. But any questions about any of the earlier presentations?
Hi, I'm actually interested in finding out from some of the presenters on their thoughts for what they'd want to do in future, having had this experience and having a choice that you can do things face-to-face or online. What would you want to do for National Science Week in the future, given circumstances allow you to do whatever you choose? Because I'm interested just from, any of them. I mean, obviously Michael's was all online anyway, but.
Or do we want to start with Yvette and Tori?
I definitely have a dream in mind for Sydney Science Trail 2021, given if someone gave me millions of dollars, all of the money, I would love to embed the on-site experience and an online experience. So taking what we've learned from this year online, and whether it's gamifying it or including augmented reality and connecting that with an experience on site, so you could experience the digital component of it, but actually as well, if you're on site, how can you engage with that? How can that Sydney Science Trail online translate and guide you in person as well, and vice versa? That's kind of what I would love to see for next year. It's a bit of combination of both, but integrating the narrative.
And that's what we're certainly aiming to do with on-site at the Australian Museum and at the Royal Botanic Gardens, Sydney, for large community days, but also running a digital at the same time is our intent for next Science Trail.
What about Phoebe and Jordan?
Hi, it's Phoebe. Look, we've had lots of, kind of iterations over the years with engagements with science, but, I mean, Michael's presentation was, just, really lifted the lid on a lot of ways to engage, which was so exciting. I just love a whole session with Michael. Just, can you team up with virtual excursions, Jack? As interesting as virtual is, it's fantastic. But look, I'm just hoping this is going to blow over, but if it doesn't, I do love these injections of technology coupled with, artists and scientists engaging together. I think those fusions, are becoming more the norm. A few years ago, it wasn't, it was like water and oil, but now it is, very much how we all engage with audiences. And I think that's really, really exciting because, both sides can be misunderstood at times, and this collaboration between the two different, ways of communication is really exciting. And I'm really looking forward to, just seeing people in that space, along with our collaborators too, how that transmits, next year or in the future.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, I feel a bit mixed. I think to be honest with you, I just really want to see the audiences. I think I'm I would love it if next year we're able to do face-to-face events. I think I've learned a lot this year about which online events work well. I think some of the schools things that we've done with Holly, who's on this call, and some of her innovations there have been really good. We've been able to reach huge numbers of students and to join up schools from across Australia, or at least across New South Wales. But I think I'd probably come back to if we are online next year, I think maybe we need to think about not always being online, that events from a distance or events that aren't in person don't have to be something, and I think Yale has flagged something that they don't have to be screen based.
Yes.
So I think probably I would think about, using the radio or using mediums that we already interact with, rather than just switching, or not just, I don't mean that in a negative way, but moving things that would be face to face onto Zoom, for example, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, it's a challenge to know what's best. I suppose from my perspective, I, of course, work with schools and work with communities with events such as the Redfern Community Centre, and I so very much hope we can get back to having that whole community connection, because it is so different doing it all online. But at the same time, we have done some great things online to reach many people who wouldn't otherwise be reached. Thanks, everyone.